Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now, according to the African Union head Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the AU is sending human rights observers to Burundi ahead of next week's controversial presidential election. The monitors will include a military team and will also be investigating alleged human rights violations and also disarm militia. Meanwhile, Uganda's Defense Minister Crispus Kiyonga is in Burundi to chair talks to help resolve the country's political tension due to President Pierre Nkurunziza's third-term bid. Mr. Kiyonga's visit comes after Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni was in the country. At least 70 people have lost their lives and about 150,000 others have fled the country since April, when President Nkurunziza announced plans to seek a third term in office. Well, election observer Abiodun Ajijola joins us from the Ondo State capital, Akure. Mr. Ajijola, thank you very much for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure as always. Now, as an observer, and based on what you hearing what just happened with the African Union, why do you think there was a sudden change of heart?
Yeah, well, I don't think it is a sudden change of heart as it were. When you talk about the electoral process, the African Union naturally would want to send observers to see how it's going. But because they knew that it's a very terrible process, they probably decided, well, we wouldn't need to send observers. But that's a very different ballgame from, human rights violations, civil war, or unrest. And that region has a history of crisis. And, Burundi had a very long 12-year war, which ended in 2005. So now we are no longer talking of just a democratic process. We're talking about lives, we're talking about human beings. So the African Union, first of all, they are set up to defend the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and with members dependent of.
Oh, I must apologize at this point. We seem to be having some technical difficulties. Maybe it has to do with the rain, but we'll try to reconnect with Mr. Ajijola as we go on in the program. But now let's take a look at more developments concerning Burundi. We'd like to take you through a list of long-serving African leaders who probably inspired President Nkurunziza to run for a third term, even though he says it's not a third term. Now, the long list of the top 5 living presidents, long-standing African presidents, goes thus. The first president is Jose Eduardo dos Santos, president of Angola. He's been in power for 36 years. Now, coming up next right now is President Robert Mugabe. He's the president of Zimbabwe. He has ruled for 35 years and counting. Next is President Paul Biya of Cameroon. He's been in power for 33 years. And here's the mediator for the Burundi crisis, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. He's been in power for 29 years, and he just left Burundi, we believe, this morning. And President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan has been in power for 22 years. Now, regarding former rulers who actually ruled until their dying day, we have President Muammar Gaddafi. He is dead now, and he ruled for 42 years. And the president of Togo, Nasibe Eyadema, was in power for about 38 years until he died. We're now going to be looking at how well or how badly the economies of these countries with long-serving leaders are faring. And for that, we're going to, first of all, we have Angola. It is the 5th largest economy in Africa. For Zimbabwe, it's the 26th largest economy in Africa. As for Cameroon, with President Paul Biya of 33 years, it is the 16th largest economy in Africa. For Uganda, which has a 29-year ruling president, Yoweri Museveni, it has the 17th largest economy on the continent. And Sudan, ruled by President Omar al-Bashir for 22 years, has the 7th largest economy in Africa. But to clear the air on that is our very own Channel's business desk, head of business desk, Bosun Omofaye. He joins us in studio, and he'll be telling us if staying in power for such a long time is actually the way forward or not. He's with me right here in studio. Bosun, thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Very interesting statistics.
Yes.
Very,
is this the way to go?
Statistics. Again, the world is looking at, you're looking at different scenarios here for those countries. If you look at, there was a time when it was all the major problem within the African Union, then the OAU, about many of those who will be present at the OAU meetings in Addis Ababa were sit-tight presidents, whether military leaders or whatever, and you had a few of them. Then you have a few within the East and Central Africa. There were freedom fighters, President Robert Mugabe, and Paul Kagame of Rwanda. Then you have Yoweri Museveni as well. If you go a little bit to the north, you find Sudan. Then you had Ethiopia had a similar issue until recently. Kenya had a similar issue, the biggest economy in East Africa, with President Daniel Arap Moi. I remember back then, before the Rainbow Coalition came in and he was out of office, and now you have something different in Kenya and Ethiopia, and those economies are now emerging and getting better. If you look at Uganda, President Museveni has also been able to hold the country out of all the problems there. Now, do these freedom fighters, as it were, or former rebel leaders who are now civilian presidents have a better hold on governance in those countries? Yes, perhaps, because they understand the terrain, they know themselves. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda knows very well the terrain in Burundi. These are colleagues, they are people who know themselves over the years, so they run the same